Ms. Mittal will be speaking on understanding the humanitarian heritage in India's craft communities, particularly the craft of bangle making in Firozabad of Uttar Pradesh. Over to you, Ms. Mittal.
Thank you, Tom. Okay, thank you. So as Tom said, this presentation is about particularly about the craft communities, and for the last 2 days we've been hearing a lot about craft, which has been on the discussion primarily has been on the boundaries in the backdrop of architecture. But what this presentation does is it brings the craft and the community and the spaces within which this craft is practiced to the forefront. Craft forms an expression of the community of human living, and in that communality is presented the culture of craft making. Cultural identity has always been a relationship between people and place, an interaction of community with the material world. The making of handcrafted objects has and continues to flourish despite the powerful juggernaut of global industrialization. Whether inspired by a calculated refutation of industrial sameness, an essential means to sustain a cultural community under threat, or a rejection of the imposed definitions of the dominant culture. The act of crafting an object that intersects with all cultural domains, economic, social, political, and ritual, and thus creating a web of social relationships across space. The craft process signify and legitimize group membership, social roles, and it becomes reserves of wealth, storing intrinsically valuable materials and the labor invested in their manufacture. Further, humanitarian heritage has been looked at primarily through the lens of conflict among communities, be it war zones, refuge centers, or disaster-prone areas. We've been seeing that over the last 2 or 3 days, for generating a sense of equity and a peace among cultures. It has been exposed to multiple threats of being lost. The idea of encouraging heritage as humanitarian is to safeguard the communities beyond buildings and stone. Firozabad is such an example where the bangle making community, a medieval craft, is dying an untimely death because of the various threats posed. Identifying the process as heritage and safeguarding the craft of Firozabad would lead to the sustenance of craft and transfer of embodied knowledge to the future generations. This includes larger communities working directly or indirectly with the craft. So how do you look at the idea of craft? Do you look at it as an object? Do you look at it as a process? Or do you look at it as a practice? Or it is a combination of all? And that's what this presentation wants to kind of bring about. So this conceptualization of heritage is therefore about the ordinary, the everyday, mundane, non-monumental social and spatial structures. This story is about ordinary people involved in acts of daily sustenance and income generation based on knowledge system passed on from one generation to the other. Before we move on any further, it's important for us to understand the significance of the glass bangle and situated within its social context. It is regarded as a symbol of femininity. For married women, bangles hold a special significance as their sign of their marriage, which in Hindi is called Suhag, and that's why Firozabad also is known as the Suhag Nagri. Different colors of the bangles have different meanings and are associated with specific cultural practices and festivals. It forms an important part of the cultural milieu in India, transversing daily lives, even literature, and even Indian cinema. A major proportion of the consumers of bangles are women from villages, towns, and small cities, which forms a bulk of the Indian population. Even though the glass bangle face threat from plastic and metal bangles, the auspiciousness associated with the material glass has led to the continuity of the use of the glass bangles. So where is Firozabad? Firozabad is a small industrial town near Agra. All of us know of Agra, and it has Taj Mahal, the World Heritage Site. It's situated in the northern state of Uttar Pradesh, and it has emerged as the glass city of India and is the center for manufacturing of various glass products, glassware, toys, chandeliers, beads, and bangles. This research particularly on the craft of bangle making in Firozabad, among others. It is an established craft settlement known for its glass bangle, both nationally and globally. A lot of exports is happening to the neighboring countries like Nepal, Afghanistan. The cluster occupies a special position as it accounts for 70% of the total glass production. The sector is very important because of the fact that it is the glass bangles in India are almost exclusively produced in this cluster. In 2010, it produced 68,000 metric tons of glass bangles with an export value of 5 billion rupees. According to an estimate by Terry, each day glass units in Firozabad produce an estimated 200 tons of glass products, and out of which, and this 2,000 units include 50 million bangles, which are being produced on an everyday basis. And it provides direct employment to 150,000 people, which basically means that 90% of the population is directly or indirectly involved in the craft of bangle making. Very briefly looking at the history of this, though the imaginary, but it has a long history, both in terms of its colonial history and its Mughal history. It was during the Mughal rule in the 16th century that many Persian travels ushered a new era in the history of glass technology, and Firozabad, a nondescript town on the outskirts of Agra, located on the river, on the bed of the center in glass manufacturing. In the antiquity of glass modern times, Santeria claims that it probably came into existence in the 14th century AD with the settling of Persian Muslims in India. Further, he cites that the survey 1950s industry was mostly in the family industry, practiced it as a spot. Prior to the Mughal development, most of the glass products were imported from Persia and Venice through the trade routes. The availability of raw material, which is sand, due to the geographical location of on the river, and abundant supply of cheap silicates establishment of Firozabad industry, and particularly glass bangles since early Mughal period. The glass was not of high quality and was colorless. Bangles made were thick and red or blue in color. The availability of abundant raw material led to the emergence of local furnaces set up to produce glass. And since it was set up in close proximity to residents, the whole family began to contribute to the process, and thus bangle making became a domestic affair and emerged as a cottage handicraft. Later, during British times, the industry witnessed further boom with improved technology and saw the potential of exporting glass products. With increasing demand and consumption of bangles, Firozabad began to establish itself on the world map of glass bangle making. The manufacture of glass and glass articles on model lines started in 1892. The most significant event that led to the boost in local production was the outbreak of the World War in 1914, which of in Austria was created, new factories came into it. And it was that in 1918, about 20 factories were at work, of which 7 at Firozabad were engaged entirely in the manufacture of glass bangles. Historically, its production has been confined to small-scale household production, with a close community which manifested itself with the domestic setup of families, industrialization, requirements of mass production of glass bangles, and environmental considerations led to the separation and then relocation of the traditional production of glass to industrial zones on the outskirts of the city. So this has resulted in a lot of skilled craftsmen which have employed these. How study has the collective and discipline of the tradition and the craft of glass products such as bangle is still critically alive in the domestic environment. Coming to the current contemporary times, the Firozabad and the craft faces a lot of risk and challenges. It faces challenges because of its proximity to the Taj Mahal, and it is known because it is a polluting industry. It is known to affect Taj Mahal, which has resulted in the relocation of factories onto the outskirts. As you will see in the the following slides that people work in conditions which have high temperature, use of harmful chemicals without any precautions or any mask or anything, which is making them very, very vulnerable to health issues. Income and lack of social security, low daily wages, which is quite disproportionate to very large family sizes. Further, government policies like demonetization has greatly affected the survival and the participation of the people in the craft process. At the international level, it also faces competition from China, where cheap products, glass products. Also, and finally, the major threat that it faces is it indicates that the younger generation is moving away from the craft to other modes of occupation within the same family. So what this research, the two key questions that this research asks is, can the craft of bangle making of Firozabadi conceptualize a humanitarian heritage? And how can the shift from the product to the process-centric approach result in better sustenance of intangible heritage in the current scenario? So therefore, the study of the craft of bangle making attempts to conceptualize heritage around craft communities on the margins, livelihoods under threat, everyday existence and sustenance, dynamic production based on community networks, a way of life situated around the craft object that is still alive, ongoing, practice that is embedded in the fabric of the city. So you will see that the whole city is the site of production of the craft. So it's at this juncture it is important for me to take you through the journey of a bangle and make you realize that something that looks very simple actually goes through a very, very complex process. And the diagram here maps the line of production of one single bangle. You'll be surprised to know that an object so simple actually goes through the network of 80 hands, which is Assi. Assi means 80 in Hindi. And the craft of bangle making is physically daunting and intricate. The process of bangle making represents a system of interconnected links of varying degrees of skills, inherited knowledge, systems, and craftsmanship. Mechanization led to the further division of labor and also specialization of skills. The process of bangle making therefore encompasses a spectrum of skill set that ranges from highly specialized craftsmen like the tarwala to unskilled laborers like the thelewala, involved in the transportation of material, unfinished product, and the final product from one point to the other. The in-between range includes skilled to semi-skilled actors. I'm going to now run you through the process of the production process very, very quickly, so that it gives you the sense of people, the place, the materials that are involved in the production process. So the usual process of bangle making passes through three major phases, ranging from making the raw material workable and getting the finished into the market. The initial process of stage one begins in factories with the preparation of raw material, mixing various compounds and preparing a workable material to be converted into spiral loops. Stage two begins when the cylindrical blob is moved onto a large balan, where three skilled craftsmen, namely the balan wala, the tarkash, and the mutia, synchronizes to convert the glass into spiral loops. The three craftsmen, the balan wala rotates it and converts into a spiral. Then the loops are cut into and they are converted into unjointed bangles, and they're formed into a toda. A toda is a bundle which consists of 320 single units. These are then transported to the household units, where the jadai and the julai, which is basically the melting of the joints and the joining takes place. This then moves to the next level of household units, where the sorting of the bangles takes place to ensure that if there are any broken bangles, they are removed. As you can see in this video, the person is sitting right in the middle of the small courtyard in the house and sorting it out. It deeply intertwines with the life, and you can see this one room that you're just seeing. It houses at least 5 to 6 people, and these shots tell you how this how the whole act of craft making kind of overlaps with the other activities. Then you also find spaces of storage, which are go downs embedded in the fabric. So each mohalla or each neighborhood units will have these go downs where the products are collected and again distributed for the next level, which is this process of decoration and addition of embellishments. And as you can see, you can see the use of chemicals, and obviously the person is wearing no gloves, and there are no masks. So these are the kind of conditions that people are working, and they are also kind of exhaling, inhaling all these chemicals. But what one should also notice is the kind of spaces that are getting generated, which are, these are simple brick structures, nothing fancy, right? And once these are finished, the decoration takes place, the transportation again takes place. It goes to household units for sorting and packaging, which may be in the houses. And once these are packed, they reach the local shops for local sale as well as exports. And what finally emerges is the glass. Sorry about the spelling. It's the glass, is the Bangle Mandi, which allows its distribution to the larger local areas, nearby areas, where people take a train and they come to Firozabad, they buy their bangles, and they kind of move on and take it on. So what emerges from this social spatial mapping of the production process is a social spatial landscape of the craft of bangle making that connects multiple social actors at multiple locations to form an interconnected web of social relationships, a complex production process, which is a composite of both small scale industrial production and household units and other ancillary structures. And as you can see in the map here, the whole city becomes the space for production. The whole city becomes the substructure which holds and supports this production process. Now, what is important is to understand who these communities are, who these people really are, who are involved in such activities. So to articulate this questionnaire survey was, apart from the mapping and photographic documentation, spatial mapping, participatory observation methods that were used, a questionnaire survey in Hindi was done, along with telephonic interviews, as pandemic didn't allow for physical interviews at that time. But the interview had four main aspects, which was to identify the social profile. What was the name, what was their age, level of education, what is the family structure, what is the number of family members, how many of them are involved, what is the relationship between craft and households, and how long do they work, what is the level of engagement, where is the practice of craft taking place, and then eventually trying to articulate what is their perception of the craft, and do they see their future generations participating in it. So what it tells us about these people is that almost all members of the family are involved in the process of craft. They work usually between 8 to 9 hours a day, and it can also go up to 16 hours in certain cases. And this engagement of 8 to 9 hours a day yields them about $1.5 to $2 as their wages a day, right? So $1 to $2 in India would mean that you're able to buy about, say, 8 bottles of mineral water. That's what it means. And the annual income is $200 a month. So you can see that most of these are below poverty lines. And $200 a month, $200 per year for a family, which could range from 5 to 7 members. There are low literacy rates. There are multiple families living in a single unit, like the one that you saw in the video. There are 4 to 5 families living in that small unit, and almost all family members are involved in the craft. Health and income related issues are the major concerns associated with the practice of craft, since most of the craft activity took place at the household level. with large number of inhabitants, use of chemicals and fumes have contributed to these concerns. And in our absence of any formal mechanism, the practitioners of craft often, So moving on, you can see that this is how the craft is being practiced at the household level. A large part of the process, bangle making, is with most family members engaged on it on an everyday basis. And this is how the craft process and the knowledge systems are internalized and passed on from one generation to the other. A sense of pride of this knowledge capital, even in younger generation, as they have learned it during their initial years, is critical for the survival of the craft. Almost at the end of the presentation, so the two primary determinants that emerged from this research is the question of heritage systems which are based on sustenance and collective action. The fact that craft processes are living systems based on traditional knowledge and practices. It is the process through which the agency of the product enlivens and enriches the community, thereby providing its identity. A system based on complex web of social relationships arising out of craft as an object, a process, and a practice bring forth this new framework of humanitarian heritage. Those involved in the trade identified themselves with the craft as it forms part of their everyday being and existence. It is also interesting to note that the perception of the bangle making, which has been a breadwinner of the family since generation, is considered a means to economics and sustenance, whereas it being a craft has been instinctive, intuitive, and the intricacies of the artwork has developed over a time of period. To develop a sense of ownership as heritage and craft, it is imperative to create awareness among its bearers of what is the significance and how the values of the craft are associated, and then maybe address whether they consider it as a heritage. Needless to say that they have values, but to focus on the fact that it has become more instinctive and has lost its true meaning for the people. So to conclude, is bangle making a craft and an industry? The policy developments are struggling with this in-betweenness of whether it is a craft or an industry. Is the craftsman only a skilled laborer or someone who signifies the labor that has been invested in creating a social object? The idea of the craftsman person with an embodied knowledge relating to the craft processes emphasizes the need for the line of production to be understood in context of its socio-spatial networks. A relook at Firozabad bangles making as sustenance-based heritage systems deeply rooted in socio-spatial systems would result in the way forward. Thank you.